All right. Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone. Happy good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Khe. For those of you who don't know me, I'm joined by my colleague, Marian Knop. Hello, Jennifer. So nice to see you. We're
Hey,
playing
how are you?
good. We're playing with a new format right now. We're live streaming this on YouTube. We're live streaming it on Twitter, and then we couldn't figure out Instagram on the spot, so that one will have to wait. So please bear with us if anything looks slightly different, and if you are on any of those social channels, so YouTube or Twitter, you'll see a version of this as well. So we're going to jump in and get to the heart of the matter, which is a topic that is very top of mind for a lot of people, which is how do you navigate what on earth is going on in the economy, right? And I'm going to share my story as a CEO of a small business, of a bootstrapped small business, but I will presume that many of the lessons will apply more broadly. And then, we've got the goal here is to make it a community-centric event, to just like have a conversation about these things so that we can learn from each other, we can grow together. And one thing that has been super, super important, I want to share with all the entrepreneurs or anyone here that is finding this environment challenging, is you are not alone. So I think that a lot of high agency people in this room, driven professionals, might say it's like, yes, but I did something wrong, or I could have done this differently. And I just want you to know that whether I talk to one person businesses or not CEOs, but like senior VPs at FANG companies across the board, every single person is like, we got this thing wrong. And so you're not alone. Don't beat yourself up. Give yourself grace. Every single person who owns a business, who touches the rails of the financial system, has been impacted in some way. So we are going to jump in. Anything I need to know, Marian, on the streams?
I just want to say we've got 30 people watching you on Twitter. We've got several on YouTube. Feel free to put in the threads or in the comments or the chat any questions you have, and I'll pass them along to Khe.
Amazing.
You're good
like
to go.
Said, we are trying this out. We got hello to my Twitter peoples. Hello to our YouTube friends. We're going to try to, if this works out as an experiment, we're going to do more of these. And again, drop in your questions, whatever channel you are in, because we will aggregate them, and we want this to be an interactive discussion. Hello, Yina. Hello, John. So let me kick in. I just got a few slides just to frame the conversation and to get us going. So let me open up my slides. Everything look okay, Marian?
Looks great. Thanks.
Awesome. So welcome, everyone. We are going to talk about CEOing in the eye of the storm, in the eye of the tornado. Super interactive. My name is Khe Hy from RadReads. I'm joined by Marian Knop, who's our product manager, and we're excited to spend the next hour with you, commiserating and cheering each other on. So just briefly wanted to introduce myself. My name is Khe Hy. I'm the creator of the RadReads blog and email newsletter. We serve 38,000 high-achieving professionals find success without sacrificing their health, their relationship, and their values. We've got a training business. We build digital products, and we do one-on-one coaching. And a teeny bit about me: I'm a former Wall Streeter, avid surfer, and love to tell dad jokes. By the way, today's my daughter's 9th birthday, so 50% of her time at home has now been crossed. Our mission is simple: to help you lead a productive, examine, and joyful life. And I'll just jump in here really quickly for those of you who, in the off chance you don't know us, Our mission is to help you lead a more productive life. But if you only focus on productivity, you would be a 5 a.m. frog eater who takes cold showers. If you only focused on the examined, philosophical, inquiring life, you would be a woo-woo navel gazer who just stares down and doesn't put any of those thoughts into action. And what's the point of doing anything if it's not joyful, right? If it doesn't make you smile, if it doesn't make you come alive, what's the point? But if you were only focused on the joyful piece, there would be a little bit of delusion, coming to face with some of the harsher realities like what we're going to talk about today. So everything we do, whether it's entrepreneurship, money, careers, career changes, relationships, is through the lens of this Venn diagram. All right, let us get started. On the left, you have a tweet from Marianne Knopf on December 15th. While other creators are doing layoffs, Khe and the team are rolling out 401ks and healthcare, right? That was on December 15th. If you look at the revenue for the year, $650,000 of revenue for a 6-person business, $325,000 of that was through online courses, memberships, consulting in descending order. We had our best year ever as an entrepreneur, and that was net income, pre-tax net income of about $250,000. So it was the best of times. But 55 days after the tweet, we had to let go of half the team. And so we went from 6 to 3. So that was a pretty rapid fall from grace. And we can talk about that in more detail. We will talk about that in more detail. So what happened? Before we go into what happened, I want to zoom out and just share a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey. So TLDR, child of immigrants, told to study really hard, get good grades, computer science major, worked on Wall Street for 15 years. Had a very good career on Wall Street, had my midlife crisis, and I'm like, am I really going to do this F9 job for the rest of my life? And I quit. The first phase, I didn't have any followers, no social presence, nothing. This was 8 years ago, May of 2015. We're approaching my 8-year anniversary. For phase 1, eat, pray, love. Take the family, go around Bali, right? Don't do much work, start the RadReads newsletter. Phase 2, I became a coach. People started to read the newsletter and asked me to coach them. Phase 3, I call that the Andrea Sachs years from The Devil Wears Prada. I might be dating myself now, but Lil Nas X was fanboying over Anne Hathaway at the Oscars, so that shows you the generational split. But I actually took an internship at a media company, and it was unpaid. And then it was minimally paid, but that's where I cut my chops grew my chops in digital media and writing. Then after that, I left, and I call it the Swiss Army knife, phase 4, where I was basically doing everything by myself. And that's where we started the online courses and then the workshops. And then last September, 2 Septembers ago, a year, 14 months ago, the Voltron phase, where it was like, we've got a product, let's assemble a team, always bootstrapped, and throw gasoline on it. So that's the journey, just to give you some context. And then in March of 2023, we downsized to a much smaller, tiny team of 3 people, including myself. So would love to talk about any part of this journey during the Q&A. So we were doing well. Took me a couple of years to figure out how to make money in this business. But the last 3 years, you could see 2020, 2021, 2022, like real kind of hockey stick like growth for our business. And again, if you look at 2020 and most of 2021, there were very, very few employees. 2020 was just me and our VA for half of the year. And 2021, we hired a few consultants towards the end of the year. So things were growing, and so was our team. One little thing that you might notice, we'll come back to, is that the blue lines went up, but the red lines didn't go up. And that's something that I missed. And I take full responsibility for. That was, and you're in it, you're looking at the numbers would have been all over the place on a quarterly basis. But when you smooth it out on the years, our margins were getting hammered. And when you further look at it, so we would launch cohort-based courses. When you further look at it, the trend, again, the annual numbers were hiding some of the trends, but things were accelerating during COVID and tapering off after COVID. So these are like basically every 4 months. These are 4-month increments. And as I wrote in the headlines, in the subheader, it looked a lot like this. Zoom's stock price. And if you look at Zoom's stock price, and if you look at Peloton's stock price, and if you look at, pick your favorite, DoorDash's stock price. I'm not sure if DoorDash is public, but it would look the same, right? And for online businesses that started in the pandemic, it was like, it wasn't reality, right? You were creating a product for where the entire world was spending every single minute online. And in hindsight, we all should have known that, like, we're not going to spend our entire lives online. I mean, people were talking back in the pandemic, like, oh, I'm going to homeschool my kids forever. Like, it took about a month of homeschooling to realize that that was never going to happen. But many businesses were, even established businesses were pandemic darlings. And when the pandemic ended, however you wanted to define that, and things went back to normal, so did valuations, so did profits, so did revenue. Drop into the chat if you can relate to that trajectory of a key metric of your business. Like I said before, our margins were getting hammered, right? We were growing, and for us, the largest cost was headcount. So we were growing we were growing a team, so we were growing our payroll, but we weren't able to grow our revenue fast enough to offset the cost of the team. So the margins really, that was a telltale sign. But again, this is looking at yearly numbers. When you're in it on a quarterly by quarterly basis, they're all over the place. So it's much harder to see a trend. And this does obfuscate a trend for better and for worse. So here are some of the lessons learned that I would love for us to talk about. And by the way, this is all in a detailed post that many of you have read, but I encourage you to read. So the first is in our course, and Marion's going to drop a free mini version of our course. We talk a lot about radical focus, the relentless art of prioritization. And that puts you in a tough position as a small business because you focus on one thing, but you don't have diversification, but you don't have the resources to diversify, or else you're spreading yourself too thin. So in general, the advice, I'd say particularly for small businesses, is to get really good on one thing, but you expose part of your flank to situations like this. So that was the double-edged sword of radical focus. We chose to focus on one product, which was our course, where many of our alums are here, at the expense of diversifying our product lines. And when we diversified our product lines, it was too late and it took too long, right? It's a lot of resources. We ignored opportunity costs, right? Opportunity cost is assessing the cost, not just the financial cost, but the time cost and the attention cost of other businesses. So we actually did have a little bit of diversification. We had a consulting business that did about 120,000 of revenue last year and was really run by one person, and who many of you have known and interacted with. And that business did great, but it was siphoning away my attention as a CEO. And there's a lot of context switching where I'd be teaching a course and then have to jump on to a coaching call or a sales call or review a contract for a business that was completely different, right? Consulting is B2B sales, and our course business is a B2C business. So they're completely different businesses. Misunderstanding, underestimating organizational complexity. You could say like, oh, well, it's only 5 employees, but 5 employees, 5 additional one-on-ones, meetings between those people, different work styles between those people. That is a lot of permutations of people. So when you have a 6-person team, it's 18. It's a combination of 15 different interactions that can happen, right? In every interaction, we had and have amazing people, but every single interaction has different work styles, different incentives, different goals, different work hours. And so every person that you add doesn't increase the complexity of your business linearly, it increases it exponentially. Definitely a big miss on my part. Forgetting that we're a startup. I, being kind of the deep rabbit hole person that I am, dove deep into OKRs, dove deep into performance reviews, dove deep into setting the right HR policies, right? Those things were taking 10, 15% of my time. And my time, by virtue of being the CEO, is the most expensive time to the company, the highest opportunity cost. And that took our eye off the ball. We didn't have a clear social media strategy. We still were getting a little bit better at it, but I don't like, believe it or not, I don't like social media. I don't like the pressure that social media puts on you, that every moment of your life has to be turned into a piece of content. So especially the more visual leaning platforms like Instagram or TikTok. And then product positioning, right? Product positioning is really how your product interfaces with the market. And the story I like to tell about product positioning, because any entrepreneur will know that positioning is a key part of the business. Product positioning is a simple example. Almond milk. Almond milk does not need to be refrigerated. Milk, cow's milk does. The buyers of almond milk in America unlike in Europe, associate milk with needing to be refrigerated. So when they walked and saw the almond milk on the dry goods shelf, they said to themselves, ew, gross, it must be fermented. The stores got wise. They moved the almond milk into the fridge, completely unnecessary. By the way, if anyone understands the economics of retail supermarkets, fridge space is gold. It's so precious. So they took something that didn't need to be refrigerated and refrigerated it, and then people started buying it. That's product positioning. The way you position your product to the taste, to the context, both real and unreal, to your customer. And that is a very challenging exercise and it's this weird intersection of product, of marketing, of research, of customer service. It's a very difficult skill. And I really struggle with product positioning. And then the last one, I drank my own Kool-Aid. I remember saying to my friends, I'm like, man, entrepreneurship is so easy. Like we just launch a new thing and it just makes more money. And it's like so easy to recruit people and it's so easy, and I got a little bit ahead of myself, right? I think there was the pandemic, Goldilocks economy. But on top of the pandemic Goldilocks economy, I think that for me, I got away from I got away from my fifth why, for those of you who have taken the course, and like what truly motivates me. I had a lot of people in my ear saying, you should raise money, you should do this, you should restructure the entity so that in case you sell it, you get this tax benefit. You should do it, put it in a trust, like all this stuff, which I spent not a ton, but enough time thinking about it and realizing like, I don't want to sell RadReads. I don't want to raise money. I don't even want to grow it just for the sake of untethered growth, because that's the expectation, right? And I lost sight of a lot of those things. So with that wraps our presentation, the prepared part of our presentation, and we will open it up for any questions. So if you're on Twitter, if you're watching on YouTube, drop in questions onto those native channels, because Marion will be aggregating. And if you're in the Zoom room with us, we can start with y'all. We have one email question, but we could start with people in the Zoom room. If anyone wants to ask a question or share a story or share a related, learning, go ahead and just, we don't even need to do the hand raising. Just go ahead and unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and let's hang.
Hey, Khe, how are you?
Hey, Carlos.
Carlos Castanello here. Been following you for a little bit. I remember the first time I saw your content, it was Notion related stuff a while back, and it really inspired me to sort of like follow the track of like a more intentional, digitally productive life. It's like I felt a lot of burden towards like how I was approaching different things in my life, and in a nutshell, it's what kind of like inspired me. You and the other few creators, what kind of inspired me into my pursuing my journey as a entrepreneur. I opened a business just in February, and I guess that the reason I'm here, and perhaps the main question that a lot of like up and coming small business owners have is that just kind of like taking the example that of your presentation, I'm just wanted to ask you, is the eye of the storm a good time to start a service-based small business? I mean, is it feasible for someone like me who has like, I worked in corporate America for 8 years. It hasn't really fulfilled me as a professional, and I'm ready to tackle on the next challenge in my life. Is it even possible? Like not even like, running a business itself, but it's starting it all together.
Yeah. It's an awesome question. First of all, congratulations. As Marion said, let's all give Carlos a little a round of applause, because that takes a lot of kudos. So I would say that there's something that I learned about entrepreneurship is that being an entrepreneur requires you to have a little like a screw loose in your head. Because if you were purely rational, you would never do it. Right? I don't know what the statistic is, like 99% of businesses fail within the first 3 years. Like, I mean, why would any rational human being start a business when they see a statistic like that? Right? So as a starting point, entrepreneurs have something off, some inkling, contrarian is a word that's thrown around too much, but there is a disagreement with the way things are currently done. So why do I say that? I say that because that feeling, that disagreement, that pull it doesn't care about markets, right? Like, it doesn't care if you're in a recession or it doesn't care if you're in a bull market. It is a deep, fundamental human drive if you feel that in you. So I would say that would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is, anecdotally, a lot of great companies are started during recessions. And by the way, I look down when I answer questions, not in my camera, so I can see the actual faces. So a lot of great companies are starting during a recession because the rules kind of get rewritten, right? A recession, an economic crisis kind of rewrites a lot of the rules, right? It rewrites a lot of the rules of marketing. There might be a new distribution channel that comes in. There might be a new generation of talent that comes in. A consumer behavior might be permanently altered. A demographic shift might happen. Like people might, start driving less, like they work from home more. So car industry might have a different challenges. So there's a lot, whenever there's a lot of things shaking, there's a lot of opportunity. Then if you look at it from purely a mathematical perspective or economic perspective or an incentives perspective, the opportunity cost of starting a business is actually lower, especially if your other option is corporate, is lower during a recession, right? Because in go-go years, you might have a 50% bonus. And in lean years, you might have no bonus. So purely mathematically, the opportunity cost is more favorable during a recession. Now, I said all these things. I don't think I actually directly answered your question. And your question is like, is now the right time to start a business? I would say that I can't answer that with a yes or no question, but a few things for you to consider. One is, does a recession reduce or increase your safety net? Right? So if you, I'm not sure what country you're in, but in the States, in the US, a recession might reduce your safety net because you're dependent on your employer for healthcare, or it's much easier to get healthcare through your employer. In Europe, that might not be an issue because healthcare is a universal right. So that's a more extreme example. But again, you would probably, because here's what would happen. You can leave corporate and try your hand as an entrepreneur, and let's say it doesn't work. If we're still in a recession, it's harder to get a job going back. But if the economy has turned, it would be much easier. So in that regards, it's easier to start a company. The safety net's better in a booming economy because your stock market portfolio is going up. There's still jobs around. Customer demand is much stronger. I mean, you're going to have customers. So again, it's a little bit hard to think about. It's going to be different, but I would definitely think about your safety net because of the 99% number, right? And there's many ways to mitigate risk. So that's how I would think about it. And then the last thing I would say is how much can you de-risk what you're doing, right? So for example, if you wanted to start a services business, could you take on service clients in the evening, while you're still working? Or if you want to create a digital product, could you start selling your product through your socials? Or if you want to write a book, can you start a Substack where you start growing that attention, right? The thing that I didn't put in this slide about my own journey is I had probably tried like 17 different ideas in my last 5 years of Wall Street. None of them ended up being the thing that I did, but I knew I had de-risked myself because I knew that I knew how to make websites. I knew how to get people together for physical events. I knew how to write. There were a lot of skills that I was building in parallel while working on Wall Street in the mornings and in the evenings, because that was about like a 65 to 70 hour a week job. So it was definitely on the excess time.
Thank you so much for that insight, Khe. I think one of the things I wrote down that really struck, I guess, a connecting fire with me is, on how to reduce or increase your safety net. And yeah, I'm in the United States, and that totally made sense. Yeah, I'm really tied to what I do right now, my full-time job, as my safety net. Without that, I can't live, I can't survive. So how could I start something that requires 110% of your focus when you're focusing 100% in your full-time job? So the two of one another, I guess, trying to pull. But I feel like ultimately, I do think there's a more like a fulfillment component that I chase more than anything. Because at the end of the day, if what I tell myself is if I remove the outcome out of the equation, my wants, my needs, the goals that I have, right? Whether if it's getting clients, making money, what do I have? What am I really doing this? And that's the way I try to see it.
The good thing about fulfillment is that it doesn't have to be 100% or zero, right? When I was on Wall Street, I was close to a zero on the fulfillment scale, in that job. But these little projects were I don't know if the scale's 0 to 100 and I'm at 100 now. The little side projects were 20 points of fulfillment. Because I think the thing you need to be careful, not you, but one needs to be careful of is that John heard me say this yesterday, but it's the when then trap. It's when this thing happens, then I'll be happy. And so we're always when I have I think a year ago, I said I want to double my Twitter followers, and I did. And nothing changed, literally. Nothing. Nothing in my life changed. And it was like such this thing in my head, like that's the like that thing would be so, and again, that's not necessarily fulfillment, but I just, a lot of people are like, oh, like I would really like to write a book. And then I'm like, can you write a weekly email for 5 weeks? So like, that's way too hard. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to write a book if you can't write an email for 5 weeks? Right. And so I think people like, we love to dream about, you see this all the time in LA. People move from a cold place like New York to LA and they're like, I'm going to start surfing. And then they go surf and it's cold, dark, lonely, and very difficult. And they're like, fuck this. I thought it would be like Kelly Slater, like shredding in palm trees on a reef. Like, no, it's like surfing in the East River sometimes. So I think, be careful. And that's why the de-risking, you can de-risk yourself financially, but also de-risk yourself from that kind of new toy syndrome. Like, oh, like if I just knew how to surf, then like I'd be happy. And then you like try it for a couple of months and you're like, this sucks.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And one of the sayings that I carry with me is that, take the time to actually pay attention to the journey, because once you get there, that's the thing that you missed.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I wrote in the essay, I just wrote it as just like a passing sentence, but a handful of people picked it up and kind of turned it into a series of tweets and stuff. But it's like, do you want to own the successful version of what you're doing? Right. So if you have like 100 YouTube followers, do you want to own the Ali Abdaal 2 million version? If you start off in banking, do you want to be the managing director of the bank that is literally on calls 7 days a week until the day they retire? Is right. And do you want, and again, it doesn't mean you can use one job as a pathway to another one, but do you want to own the successful version? That question, I never asked it explicitly, but that kept me from going down the VC route, like a VC backed company. Because that like going public, like, fuck no. Like, I don't want to like Sarbanes-Oxley and like deal with all that shit. Like, do you want the successful version of the thing that you're building? And it sounds so obvious when you say it, but I bet that there's some of you looking at what you're doing right now and being like, I actually don't think I want the successful version. There's a joke. It's like, what is becoming a partner at a law firm is like winning a pie eating contest, and the prize is more pie. That's careful of the success that you chase. All right, next question. Thank you, Carlos, and best of luck to you.
Let's go with the email question. Let's see. Leaf asks, as CEO, how do you cope during the economic downturn, especially when the runway is thinning? And he gave you multiple choices here. A, do you take temporary non-related gigs like marketing development back to previous job related? B, do you ask your team to do non-related gigs similar as above? Or C, something else?
That's a great question, Leif. I mean, the first one is you ruthlessly cut expenses. It's the one thing you can control. You can't control revenue as much as we'd like to. So the first one would be to cut costs. And then the second one is, do you take, non-related gigs? I mean, in this case, we're a little bit of a hybrid company in the sense that, there is a service element to what we've done, what I've done. But they're going, do you go back to, but there is a team, right? So it's like, I can't go completely off the reservation and like become a gym instructor or something, and, still keep the team around. So I think the first question is the first answer is you cut expenses. The second is that you look for low-hanging fruit opportunities for revenue, right? And that might not be in things that you want to do exactly. Hopefully they're things that they're adjacent to what you're doing. They're not completely new businesses. So that would be another thing. You would probably, again, I think it's very difficult to launch new businesses when you're playing off of your back foot, right? Because new businesses take a lot of mental energy. There's a lot of experimentation. You might just need to change your positioning on things, right? If you're selling a product to a certain market, right? Like, if you're selling SYP to individual consumers, what happens if you sell it to financial advisors, right? Or what happens if you sell it to, law firms or college students or so on, right? So there might be a way to reposition what you're already doing without completely revamping your product. As for your team, I mean, if your team is salaried, then obviously there is the potential upside that's not there during a recession. But the salary, like, it's quite uncommon to cut people's salaries. So really, there with regards to the team, I mean, I think in newer businesses, like, people are encouraged to have side projects. I think in Wall Street and like more traditional businesses, it's discouraged. I think it's going to depend on your industry, but the cost cutting is the easiest one.
Awesome. John, are you willing to ask your question live?
Yes, thank you, Marianne. Hi, Khe.
Hey.
I'm thinking about during a recession or more challenging time right now, what sort of opportunities or types of things could I be looking out for that like may not exist during good times when everything's going well? Like, where are there opportunities maybe to zig or do things that others aren't doing, or just to be aware of that are possible now to kind of capture momentum during a time things may not be generating momentum otherwise?
Yeah. That's a really tough question to answer. I don't know if I'm fully qualified to answer it, but I mean, if I was a venture capitalist, what I would ask is, like, what are the structural shifts that are happening as the result of this recession, right? So recessions can precipitate structural shifts. So, I mean, this one's not related to the recession, but it's one that's been happening, is like the electronification of global car fleets, right? So what does that mean? Like, that's just a completely new market. And I think California is going to be all EV by 2035. So, there's just like the creation of new markets that not necessarily related to, a recession, but it's kind of happening in this recession. Another thing that you could look at is, I mean, I think you'd want to be careful, but like, what shifts during a recession, right? And so what's the obvious thing that shifts during a recession is people's willingness to pay for things, right? So if you want to and are able to compete on price, right? Let's say you look at Amazon and you look at cooking knives, and all the cooking knives, knife sets, are over $50. There might be an opportunity to sell a cooking knife set for 30, right? The quality might not be as good, the margins might not be as good. How does the marketing work for, there's all these different things that you'd have to consider, but you can compete on price, right? So anywhere that you can compete on price, you have an advantage. But that, I'd be very careful, because when you build products that compete on price, at the end, ultimately you're always competing with Amazon at the end of the day. It's a race to the bottom. It's just, how long can you play that game? Or you're competing with Walmart or Costco, or if you're in the land of consumer. Another thing is to observe what consumer behaviors are shifting, So if flying and hotels they are really expensive, people are still doing, I'm amazed that people are still flying this much. There's still like that pent up COVID money. But if people are going to stop flying as much, but they're still going to want a vacation, then what does that mean? Does that mean like a new market for like staycation type things? Does it mean like more driving centric opportunities, like more driving focused? If people are driving more to go on vacation, what does that mean for kids' entertainment? What does that mean for packaging your food? What does that mean for, what mapping software do you use? Like, I think, so you can look at all of these different trends. And then obviously it's like supporting people that have lost their jobs, retraining people, vocational training, helping them get out of debt, like financial, like that kind of stuff. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that the people that are losing their jobs, they're the least willing to spend money. So you'd have to think about that. And then there's like the vulture side of things, but like a lot of things go under during recessions. And so there's an opportunity to buy things cheaper, whether it's companies, it's homes, it's developments, like things have like construction projects will stall, have stalled. So like if you got capital, you can put it to work because things are much cheaper and they will probably continue to get cheaper.
That was awesome, Khe. You said when change is happening, entrepreneurs can maybe be more nimble and capture some of those where, and I really liked your point about maybe finding ways to support people who have been affected by the recession and almost generate long-term loyalty there. Thank you, Khe.
Yeah. I mean, a very obvious one would be, I'm sure it exists, we've thought about doing it, is to collect like job listings for your avatars. Right? That would be a no-brainer. Like, I'm sure everyone in this call is a similar-ish avatar in the sense that we would kind of consider employment at similar-ish companies. That would be a no-brainer. I'm sure it exists, but like if you wanted to grow your audience, or like that would be an easy way. And that would be another thing. Like if you wanted to grow, like let's say you start a newsletter and you have like very low following. I guarantee that if you had a targeted jobs listing site or collect email, you would grow your followers very quickly. And then as the recession ended, you would have built up that audience where you could easily expand or pivot into like sharing career skills or like helping people grow in their career, showing them where to invest their money and like things like that. Awesome.
All right.
Job.
Our next question is, are you surprised of the direction of the economy to date, or did you predict this would happen going back to January of 2021?
I am completely surprised and caught off guard. I mean, I wouldn't, here is why we grew so fast, is because a lot of the entrepreneurs I would talk to would say, always think about hiring for what your business looks like in a year. So let's think about that. It's January 2021. Jennifer knows this. She's been in this world. It's January 2021 or January 2022, lost all sense of time. And you're like, okay, well, what does this business look like? Like if you go back to the charts, they've started to flatten a little bit, but the general trend is still way up. And so this is what happened. I was like, oh, okay, maybe the lines won't go up as high, but they'll go up like at a slower incline. So then it's like, okay, if that's the case, like a team of 6 made perfect sense. But what happened when the advice that people give that's bull market advice, because that assumes that next year will be better off than the prior year, which is the case most of the time, right? There's no period in the stock market, don't quote me on this exactly, but there's no 15-year period where stocks lose money on average over 15 consecutive years, right? So like things go up in general. They go up because of inflation, and they go up because of global GDP growth. Right? And mostly because populations grow and then demand for stuff grows. So you make more stuff. So no, I had no idea. In hindsight, if you look at the graphs are actually showing that there were some problems happening. I thought that they were more structural, related to like people working from home or no longer working from home. And I had no idea that we'd be in a banking crisis in March 16th of 2023, like a straight up like Lehman style bank, like, like Janet Yellen, Joe Biden, I don't know who the head of the ECB is, Schultz in Germany, like talking on the phone about bailing out Credit Suisse, like I didn't think that would happen. So no, I had no idea, but I think that the problem, I forget which bias, someone will know the bias, but recency bias, right? You just think that the next 6 months are going to look like the last 6 months. Like human beings are very wired to think that way. And so I really try to think like, how could the only thing that I think I could have done differently was there was a few hires when I was like, I want to hire you now, but I should probably wait. And there it was like that the competition of a hot job market. They're like, if you wait, I will work somewhere else. So you didn't really have the option to wait. Again, this is all very bull market type decision making. So that's one. That one would have been hard to know. The second would have been closer, just like being more honest with myself about the declining margins. I would say this in meetings. I'm like, we're working twice as hard for the same amount of money. But I didn't have like a chart that's like, look at our margins getting annihilated. But I said many times, Marion can attest, like we're working twice as hard for the same amount of money.
We are going to take a question from Twitter. This is
all right
from Josh.
Twitter
Red.
People are still listening. I love you. Twitter is my #1 social network. But follow me on TikTok. I'm dying for followers. I have 148. The platform's gnarly for a 43-year-old. But it's fun. I think I'm having fun with it.
Yeah, follow him on TikTok. You'll get a laugh. All right. Josh Red says, you mentioned diving deep. Yeah, you mentioned diving deep into OKRs and then potentially being a distraction as a startup. What other business productivity activities could seem helpful but actually might distract you?
Corporate policies is a big one. Like it's one thing to know what the vacation policy is. It's another thing to like make it so like the vacation policy didn't get so complex, but like just like spending mind space on policies. I think the other thing that is this is a tough one is going W-2. When you take contractors to W-2 employees, it is a huge financial expense. It is a tremendous amount of paperwork, and we had consultants doing it. It's just a very expensive and time-consuming process. But there's a catch-22 here, is like, I really, really, really wanted to do W-2 because I knew what it's like to be a contractor and to have a family and like fight for healthcare on like Obamacare and ACA, and like watching my pregnant wife like not be able to get the care that she wanted because we were on ACA. It's awful. And we were very lucky. Someone made a bet on me and basically found a way to give me healthcare. And it was very expensive to them, corporate healthcare. It was very expensive to them. And they didn't have to do it, but they did it because they cared about me. And ever since that moment, I was like, especially having lived through that, I was like, I want people to have that. Like, that is not something people should worry about. Now, look at me trying to be like a European nation state as a, floundering startup of 5, that comes with a cost. It comes with a financial cost. I think the rule of thumb for a W-2 employee relative to a contractor is that it's anywhere from 30 to 50% more expensive. So if someone's making $100,000, the cost to the employer is anywhere from 130 to 150, depending on how generous your benefits are. So it's real money. But on top of that, it is a lot of administrative work, even if you have consultants, even if you use JustWorks. Just like keeping up with JustWorks is like, we have a consultant who we pay $750 a month just for her to manage JustWorks, so that I don't have to like go in and manage JustWorks. And the thing with, it's really complex because if you have a remote team, every employee is subject to the state laws of their state. And if they move, then you have to like flip them to the new state and deal with those things. And like JustWorks is pretty good at that stuff, but there's a lot of paperwork. And it's a lot of paperwork that you can get caught up on. Oh, another one. Going back to Josh's question, performance reviews. I wrote about that in the essay. Again, I think the intention was good. It was like, be very transparent, give the team a lot of guidance, give the team a lot of psychological safety, and be very thorough. And I think I whiplashed from Wall Street, where like performance reviews are a joke. It's like the manager, like there's like the emails that come in and it's like, submit your performance review for your direct reports, in like, and like the entire company is like scrambling to like, I know people that have used ChatGPT on Wall Street to fill out their performance reviews. That's how little they care about them. Teachers also do this all the time for report cards, I found. Private and public school. It was a knee-jerk reaction back from there, where I'm like, can you give a fuck about like people's performance, like instead of like entering it into ChatGPT? So that was another one, and we did it too frequently, and we did 360 reviews, and like the whole thing ended up taking like 10% of my time of each quarter. So we could have probably done that process not as intensively, not as thoroughly, and not as frequently. But again, the intentions were very clear and good. And then the last thing was, we spent a lot of money on legal. We could have done a lot of turnkey stuff on terms and condition, like LegalZoom type stuff. And our lawyer is awesome, and she might be watching this, and I have zero regret paying her and her team for what they did. I think like anything, it was just like, if we had known that our revenues were going to drop by 70%, we would have just waited. We wouldn't have done it all then, right? Even with the W-2 thing, that was like, knowing what you know, it's like, if I had known that the revenue, like we literally put everyone on W-2 and then terminated them, 50 days after I put them on W-2. So like, I wouldn't have done that had I known that that outcome was coming.
All right, let's take a live question from Jennifer.
Yes. Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, hi, Khe.
Jennifer, our VC-backed founder in the trenches.
Yes.
Hopefully you got your cash out of us. I mean, now we're all good, but last weekend must not have been fun for you.
It was a weird thing because everybody was joking about, when in the world are Mexicans banks safer than US banks? And I was like, yeah, that's true. Now we are on time. Khe, you were saying about how exponentially the complexity of a company moves when you have more people. In our case, we are like a 30 people team right now. And we pivoted last year from a marketplace to a SaaS. So the question is, how do you change like the whole productivity strategy? Talking about like, you know, the mindset of like, let's have initiatives and let's measure like those initiatives and be like very clear on how we're moving forward and how are we stacking our times in them, and how often should you go with your team and say like, hey, like everything shifted, this is how we're being productive now. Like, what would be your key advice towards doing that?
I mean, I think that's a hard, I mean, the most people I've ever managed is 10. So I'm not I'm not experienced in that size of organizational complexity. I would say a few things would be, it's probably impossible to over communicate. Right. And almost to the point that the communication, I think the best communication is through like memes, not the actual memes, but like catchphrases or phrases that you repeat over and over and over again. And so to get people on the same page, right? We even borrowed one from Jeff Bezos, right? Which is, it's day one, right? And that's the way that he reminds his, 100,000 person company to preserve a startup mindset. And it's very effective. Their headquarters are called day one. So if you can over communicate through, memified language, things that get repeated, and they're like, oh, Jennifer's going to talk about our mission and she's going to say XYZ because she always says XYZ. Like, you can never repeat something like that too much. So that would be one thing with like over communication and transparent, over communication and over sharing. Because I think you know this, but I know you know this, but as when people don't hear something in general, as humans, like we have a bias towards assuming things are going to be worse rather than better, right? Like, I'm sure there's a name for that bias as well. I'm not doing well in my biases today. But, we attach to negative information. We fill the empty space with negative stories more than positive stories. If you think about, the last time you and your partner, your romantic partner were in like a silent treatment, towards each other, you're probably assuming something negative versus something positive. So that's just how people are wired. So if you can get ahead of that wiring. In terms of the productivity, I honestly, I don't have a good answer for you. I think the only thing that a few thoughts is like, one, if there's a pivot, can you reduce the risk of like having to repivot? So what I mean by that is like, instead of doing things on a quarterly cycle, can you switch to like a 2-week cycle, right? Because that might actually be like, is the cadence of your deliverables in line with the vision that you have of a strategy? And like internally right now, we're in a much more experimental phase. Like we don't know exactly where we're going. And so, but we still have little like things that bring us closer to figuring that out, little things that are experiments, little things that drive us that short-term revenue. So just like thinking that the cadence, like a quarterly cadence is probably way too long for a startup anyway, but a quarterly cadence might be way too long for a startup that's pivoting in a down market. And maybe the right cadence is, a week or 2 weeks, and that might change your whole style of management, which again is beyond my scope, but like maybe it's more of like an agile type approach than like a command and control, like OKR goal setting framework.
Thank you, Khe.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. We're going to take another live question from Steph.
Thanks, Marianne. Hi, Khe. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
Steph.
So my question is, I'm CEO and also currently moonlighting as CFO, CMO, and COO, basically the C-suite at my business, and we're a small team, so we're three full-time, two part-time, and then we have a bunch of like facilitators that are more seasonal. What do you recommend is an effective use of my time? I think just transitioning in the last couple months, it's been hard to figure out, like, is this the most important thing that I should be doing right now? So like, what percentage do you recommend of my time is like managing people versus like strategizing versus networking? Like, there's just so many things. Yeah.
That's like the $1 million question for, any small business.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I wish I had done differently is I wish I had spent way more time on product positioning, product marketing. So that would have been one thing. I don't love marketing. I don't even really like it that much. And that's something I need to look deeply into, because like if you run an online business, like you probably need some kind of marketing, but not really, right? Like B2B businesses don't need, it's a different kind of marketing. It's that, so that would be one thing. I would also say probably in this environment, stay close to the revenue. So like if things pull you away from revenue, like policies and personnel, again, like you want to nip the like negative, there's like the defensive personnel issues, like these people aren't getting along, or there's an underperformer, like definitely take care of those. But the more offensive personnel decisions, like networking to like find this next hire what we might make in like 2 years, like those things are always, the biggest job of a CEO in general is to set a vision and recruit in like a traditional company. Obviously you have all the other hats as well. But I would say stay very close to the revenue, because that will be your highest leverage contribution. It'll be your highest leverage near and intermediate term contribution. And you might have to sacrifice a little bit on the longer term stuff, like, what's our 5-year vision, like things like that, to make it to make it through. Right. And then as the CFO, I would just I would look at all of the numbers, but I never really like analyze them, right? And really kind of like the way like a CFO would or a controller would. I'd just be like, oh, those are the numbers. Like I would be like, how much money do we have in the bank? How much do we think is coming in, and how much is going to go out in the next quarter? Like that was basically how I looked at the numbers. It's like, do we have more coming in than going out? And then when we did it, then we had to make changes. That's probably not the thing. The other thing too is I would notice things where you have resistance, and like really try to understand why you have the resistance. Like I'm wondering where, there's a lot of stories in my resistance to social media marketing that aren't true. And so like, where did those stories come from, right? Is it that like, I can't control myself? Well, like if I have those apps on my phone, is it that like, I find them, bad for society? Or like, what's the reason that I was so against having a social strategy? I think that was that really hurt, not having a social strategy.
Thank you so much, Khe. I have my own digging to do with my social media relationship too. So on that same boat with you.
Yeah. It's so tough. You have the advantage where it's not an identity-based business. But still, even businesses that aren't identity-based businesses, people still follow the CEO, and the CEO oftentimes has more followers than the business account. So I'm sure that's the case in your so like you kind of are an identity business. Yes. In that regard. One thing, this is the cheapest hack, but it's so effective. Some of you might have heard me say this. but I basically have 7-minute timers on all of my social media on my phone using iOS parental controls, and I don't know the password. So I have to ask Lisa for permission to, like, once my 7 minutes of TikTok run out. And so a few things, it works really well because you're really, like, there's a lot of things that you need to do in-app. And so you really got to budget your time for the in-app. It's almost too extreme where I like write my captions out in drafts and then like to save like 30 seconds of those 7 minutes. So like there's probably some unhealthy behaviors there. And then you do all of your scheduling outside of the apps. And then you do all of your research on laptop. Because like Instagram on a laptop sucks. Like it is a horrible experience. But if you're just trying to like see how accounts are set up and like what people are posting, it's perfect, right? Like you kind of like get me out of this hellhole. I just need to do my work and leave. So that it's like a small hack, but that has really helped, because there's a few times where like I needed to do something and then I asked Lisa and I'm like, yeah, can you just unlock it for the day? And she unlocks it for the day. And then I'm like, it's like 45 minutes, so we'll go by. All under the name of research.
Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, Steph. All right. I know we're at the past time. So just want to let you all know, if you need to hop off, feel free to hop off. I'm going to ask 2 more questions to Khe from the same person. And we will be sending out this replay later today, so you can check out anything that you might have missed. All right. So Khe, your last 2 questions come from Aaron Amin. He already had to pop off. But the first question is, have you thought about changing your pricing strategy, creating a mid-ticket item between the a la carte courses and SYP? And then I'll ask you the second question.
So pricing is an interesting thing where with a mid-ticket, the lower you go in price, the higher you have to go up in volume for the same amount of money. So then you get into a volume game. And so I'm very apprehensive of getting into a volume game because that is just not our strength. Like I've been on Twitter for 10 years and I've had 2 viral tweets. I've written 225 blog posts and I've had 1 viral essay. Like I am not good at going viral. And, to use marketing terms, like if you want to grow your volume, you need to be really good at top of funnel. So if I look at like the top of funnel people who kick ass, like Dickie Bush and Catherine Bourgoin, I'm going to butcher their name, Justin Welsh, Sahil Bloom, they are top of funnel machines. They are so good at that snappy, and it's not even junk foody. There's like they don't even do the like, this is, Twitter is a free university, like that bullshit. But they're really good at that. And I'm not good at it. I don't know if it's just because like I like writing too much. It's because I don't spend a ton of time on social. Like when I'm on social, it's very surgical. It's like, what can I learn, or how do I reply to this, or how do I hop on this trend? So I'm just very, very, very reluctant to go play a volume game. If anything, one of the products that we kind of quietly offered was it's kind of like, it's SYP existential for men in finance. And that product was sold basically through DMs and texts, and it did 60,000 in revenue. So like, I would rather to do $60,000 on a $300 price, you need to sell 2,000 units. That is freaking hard. The Life OS sells 0.5 units a week. And that's a good product. Doesn't have good marketing behind it, but it's a good product. 0.5. So that means it sells, 25 units a year without Black Friday sales and things like that. So to sell, what did I say? 2,000 units of that, it's a different beast. And so if anything, I would see us moving more upstream, more into higher ticket. People who spend 15,000 on a mastermind, like, doesn't matter if it's 17,000. And here's a crazy thing about those super high-end masterminds is that they have no customer service. Like, someone that has $15,000 to spend is not bugging you to know when the replay is coming out. Right? They don't care. If anything, a lot of them say, you're going to have to make sure you get me to show up. That's like their biggest hesitation, is like, will I show up to the thing I paid for? So I could see definitely some of that. It's not as fun to do, because then you really need to niche down, right? Like 40-year-old men in finance, like, it's a very narrow demographic. It's a very lucrative demographic. If you think about business models like YPO, they organize like quarterly hangs with CEOs, local CEOs, and it's like 10 grand per person for 4 meetups a year. So if anything, and it's like, how do you balance that? How do you balance those two things, right? The volume game and I think it, for me and us, it lends itself well. Like, we have this conversation all the time about middle of funnel versus top of funnel. Like, top of funnel is like your BuzzFeed, like your whatever the platform's version of BuzzFeed. It's a quick hit. It's dopamine inducing. It's the thing people want. They want sex. They want money. They want power. They want status. And how do you give it to them really quickly? Right. Or you have to be really, really funny. But middle of funnel, you can write a 3,000 word essay on what went wrong with your business and get 25, CEOs and solopreneurs to stay on a call for an hour and 15 minutes. It's a very different game than 8 things you need to do to be rich by 25, which, by the way, we all click on those stories because we want to know. It's our primal instinct. And so I do give kudos to the Justin Welches, and they have done top of funnel without getting to that level of cringe. There's definitely some cringe, but there's always cringe in top of funnel. Top of funnel has to be cringe by definition, because you need to water yourself down and you need to play on the human instinct so intensely to achieve your objective. If you want to do nuanced top of funnel, good luck. You're just talking to your audience. You're not getting new people. And so it's an interesting tension that, I'm sure Steph's thinking about a lot, because, there's a double-edged sword to ignoring top of funnel, right? I'm friends with Sahil Bloom, and he's got a 250,000 person email list, and we have a 40,000. We're both, I might write a book, he's writing a book. If our books were the same in quality, his would do 6 times better, at least. So you can't ignore the top of funnel stuff, because there's SYP would have made more money if we were better at top of funnel. Right? If I knew how to write the Dickie Bush style threads, SYP would have made more money. We have to think about the opportunity cost of that and the cost of doing that. But you can't ignore top of funnel, which we did to some extent. We did SEO, but you can't get consumed by top of funnel either. And that's a line we're trying to figure out right now. That is a very difficult line to navigate, especially when your bias is towards middle funnel content.
All right. Happily moving topics to another question. You said ruthlessly cutting costs in the first lever is the first lever that you would pull in a recessionary environment. Do you do this before or after attempting to adjust your marketing and positioning?
Oh, you do it as soon as you realize there's a problem. So that would presumably be before. I mean, cost is the one thing. I mean, we did 3 months severance for the first round of layoffs and then 6 weeks of severance for the second. But in the US, there's no severance laws. Like, you just have to give, like, it depends on the state, but it's like 5 days notice. So the quickest way to the quickest way to cut costs is to cut payroll. And a lot of those things, like changing positioning, is a little bit like readjusting the Titanic, right? I haven't talked about Notion in a public call in 2 years, and Carlos still alluded to my Notion videos. Like, I can't like de-Notion myself. Like, time has to do that. So positioning is a Titanic, unless you could find the almond milk trick. That was pretty cool.
Thank you so much, Khe. Everyone really enjoyed your insights today.
Thank you, Marianne, for putting this together. Thank you. Yeah, everyone. Everyone found me through Notion, right? I can't, like, I'd be crazy to take off all our Notion content from YouTube, because then like our top of funnel would collapse, which just goes to show that like you can't just like make these shifts. These shifts don't happen overnight. Like, I haven't created a piece of Notion related content in 2 years. And yesterday someone sent me something on Twitter about like how cool this, formulas video is. All right, most important takeaway. Let's go hang out on TikTok. It's for 7 minutes a day. All right, bye everyone. Thanks, team. Thanks, Marianne. Have a great day. Good luck to everyone.